Welcome to WAMD, the We Are Motor Driven podcast.
Welcome to the We Are Motor Driven podcast. My name is Brendan Appel. Today with me is
Jennifer.
Paul. Harvey.
And we are talking about something near and dear to my heart.
It's a hot topic.
It is a very hot topic. Prepare for some very heavy opinions on this one. And it happens to be the manual transmission.
Manual transmission.
Dun, dun, dun.
Hashtag save the manual.
Absolutely. I'm looking at a computer right now that Jennifer brought in that just says, just say no to flappy paddles. And I happen to be wearing the Church
of the Third Pedal.
Of the Third Pedal shirt, yes. Thank you, Blip Shift. This is, I have learned on a manual. I have driven mostly manual cars my entire life. I still own a C7 and a Jetta that are both manual. And I have a lot of thoughts as to why this seems to be on its way out. There are some death throes. There's a lot going on, but none of it seems to be heading in the right direction for the enthusiast crowd who enjoys rowing their own gears.
Rowing your own gears, like the lost art of heel and toe downshifts, you know? Like right now, if you own a manual car, congratulations, good for you, bravo, pat on the back from us.
Yes,
it is
you.
also an anti-theft device.
Yep.
Because nobody's going to be able to steal your car. You know?
Anybody who knows how to drive it would never do that because they're already car guys, and car guys don't mess with other people's cars.
That's right. They don't steal your cars. We
Yes.
expect each other's cars.
The ones who would steal it aren't going to know how to drive it. So,
Brendan, you still currently have a manual.
I have a C7 Corvette Grand Sport.
Okay, and I have a 2019 Golf R Spectrum.
And my daughter drives a
112.
Jetta, which
is
I
also
own,
manual.
so it's still my car.
Right, and that's
But,
manual.
Yeah, that's manual, 5-speed.
Ours is a manual.
I had the Focus RS, which was
But
a
you
manual.
don't have a
I do
manual
not
currently.
currently have a manual right now. No. Sorry.
Harvey?
Does my Ducati 900 SS count as a manual?
I mean, I would. I would count it as yes.
It's like a consolation prize.
Yeah, but
that's
no,
a great
I don't.
bike.
I don't currently have a car with a manual transmission. We are a one-car family. I'm the worst car guy ever from that standpoint. We have a Ford Maverick because it fits our life perfectly.
Yeah.
But when I drive for fun, I drive a manual, of course.
For sure.
Yeah. And, for me, it's the engagement with the car. I mean, my first car was manual everything. So not
Right.
just the transmission. The brakes were manual. The steering was manual. Everything about the car.
Wait, there was no power steering?
No power
No,
steering?
on the X19, no. Well, it was a rear-wheel drive car.
It was a mid-engine
rear-
car
mid-
and rear-wheel
mid-engine.
drive, and so there's not a lot of weight
This
in
is
the
your little
front.
wedge.
This is the little X19, and the whole thing weighed 1,800 pounds at the most. I mean, you could pick it. 3 guys could pick that thing up and move it. So, it really, I mean, you feel like you are part of the experience because that car is going nowhere without you. Anybody can get in and drive an automatic, right? I mean, like a 90-year-old woman can get in and drive any automatic. But if you do not know how to drive a manual, and that
not
is a
moving.
symphony of feet and hands and just kind of the feeling of it, that car ain't going anywhere. And that's the beauty of it, is that you are an integral part of the experience. You're not just a passenger in the
Right.
vehicle.
You're in control.
You are total control.
You wanna get rid of cell phones from driver distractions? Give everybody manual transmission cars.
Well, now you know why my daughter, her first car was a 5-speed manual Jetta.
I don't know there, Jennifer. I could eat. I could do a lot of things
Well, I
while
mean,
driving
once-
my manual.
Once you're in sixth gear,
gear
and
on the
cruising,
highway,
yeah.
sure.
But you have mastered the art of driving a manual before you can even do that, right?
In which case, you probably wouldn't be a terrible person to have a phone. Not that I condone it.
Right.
Behind the wheel.
So, as we've seen over the years, the manual has gone away in more and more and more vehicles. And it's really just been a sad commentary on not only just the auto industry in general for an enthusiast. Now, I'm not talking about people who are just using cars to get from A to B. They don't care. But the people who actually enjoy driving, and this is, the feeling that they get when they drive, that's important to them.
Yeah.
This has been slowly going away over years. And I have my theories as to who's responsible for that. I think, this started...
Race car drivers.
Yeah, no. Well, it used to be that those Indy
I'm not-
cars.
I'm not
and F1s.
joking.
No, you're
not-
absolutely right.
And you're not wrong. But, that's we always say, we have this saying because people are like, oh, automatics are faster. Automatics are faster. That wasn't true up until maybe about 5 to 10 years ago, right? Then they started getting faster. Okay, I grant you, they're faster.
Well, there's a mileage trade-off too, and you couldn't get the same mileage in an auto that you could in a manual, but now that's changed.
Reverse
that's
too.
changed, yeah.
So I grant you that they're faster, but is it more fun? And are you getting paid by the 10th of a second to go around a racetrack?
We used to say, unless you have like logos and stuff on your car,
Right. Unless your livelihood depends on tenths of a second, it is much more fun to drive a manual anywhere, but especially around a racetrack, even though it'll be a little bit slower than the automatic counterpart. I think what happened is we saw this all throughout, pretty much a lot of it through starting in the 80s, in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, is that manufacturers somehow got it in their heads, some of them at least, and enough of them, that the manual was the budget option.
Right.
That we're going to come out with this great, nice car, and we're only going to put the manual in the smallest engine with the least amount of options, with no luxury, no nothing, right? And you saw this. Chrysler did it all the time in the 90s. I mean, I remember when the Stratus came out. Your brother Paul bought one, and the top level with the biggest engine, automatic only. If you wanted a manual, you had to go down to a 4-cylinder. It's like, but that is the opposite. Like, you should be putting that in the best performing vehicle, because that's where people want to drive the manual. They want a performance manual. They don't want the garbage that you're.
And you're right. But I think it's two trains of thought, right? So on the performance side of things, everybody's stuck with the manual. And then a certain Italian company came out and was like, no, our double clutch gearbox is way better. Even though when you watched those early, like, Ferrari 360s, driving down the road with the paddle shifters, they looked like somebody who didn't know how to drive a manual.
Right.
Like they're herky-jerky kind of thing.
Yes, it did.
Now, obviously, today they're lightning fast.
Oh, they're amazing today.
They're absolutely awesome on the racetrack. But I sat down several years ago with Marco Mattiacci, who was president of Ferrari North America at the time, at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. And we had a nice breakfast, and we were talking about like a project car. And I said, well, it should have a manual transmission. And there's a gentleman, Nicola Boari, who was head of like Ferrari's, what became Ferrari SP, their special projects, right? This is like the early gestation of that. And he was at the table too. And Marco and I actually got in a heated conversation about an actual 3-pedal manual transmission versus their paddle shifter. And he's like, no, but this is faster, That's a horrible impersonation. I'm so sorry, Marco. And, but I'm like, yeah, but it's less involving. This, I'm flipping my hands back and forth for listeners, versus pushing in a clutch, shifting a gear, especially Ferrari's open-gated transmission where you get the click-clack sound and that... The reward of matching, rev matching, and getting that sound, and oh my
the heel toe and everything.
Lord,
Yeah, if you've never
how can you
experienced
not
this.
understand that from a company that's all about passion, passion? Like, what are you thinking? And we had a heated conversation, and finally Nicola, who's drinking his orange juice or grapefruit juice or something, he goes, she wants to be involved. And I'm like, this right here, this is what I'm saying, so like the performance then, I wasn't joking when I said race car drivers, because I wonder how many F1 drivers today, and this season there's 6 rookies, how many of them can drive a manual?
Yeah.
I would hope all.
Yeah.
I'm sure they do.
I
but
doubt that it is all.
But I'm wondering if it is all. Like maybe it's a 80% take rate on manuals,
Well, and I'll tell you something specifically about Ferrari. The greatest thing about the fact that every Ferrari was a manual in the 80s and pretty much throughout the 90s and into the 2000s was you had to have the special skills necessary to drive a manual, which anyone can learn it, but you have to put the work in. But you had to have some skill to be able to even drive that car.
Yep.
So it became even more special than it already was,
Right.
because not everybody could drive it. And I remember just when I was a kid seeing these cars, and the first thing I would do whenever I saw a beautiful car, I would walk up to it and I would look in at the transmission. And if it was a manual, I was in awe, and I was, this is so cool. And if it was an automatic, the air that was let out of that balloon in my soul, looking at an automatic sports car, like the 928s used to kill me because there's so many autos out there. And it just,
it was a GT car.
But listen, kind of the revenge of the manual is in resale value. The manuals
Yes.
are like double, triple.
Look at the
what
Ferraris.
There's a Ferrari 599 manual for sale right now, and it's more than double what any of
the automatic.
The
And why
double
doesn't
clutch
that
ones are.
tell Ferrari what people want?
because
Why
they've
when
invested the money.
when Porsche comes out with the 911R in manual only
Oh, my
and they
God.
sell it out in 5 seconds, why doesn't that tell them
It was
that
pre-sold
people
out.
want that? They want the manual transmission.
Okay,
Give
so
them
the-
what they want.
The 991.1 came out, GT3.
Yes.
PDK only. I was fortunate enough to get an allocation out of state, and had to wait. And then, like, I did an exclusive build, and then I get an email from Porsche saying, nope, you can't do this color. I'm like, okay. Nope, you can't do this interior. Okay. Nope, you can't have this option. Okay, let's just make it a black car, which is what we did. It was a black car with black interior and, like, red highlights. And I went and picked up the car. You know how long I owned that car? About 16 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
About 16 hours. I'm not joking. I left the dealership and did nothing but drive for like 12 hours straight. And then I went to, like, I drove all night. Celine Dion song. We should throw that in there. I literally drove all night, not to get to somebody, but because I wanted to fall in love with this car that I'd waited like 3 years for. It's the next GT3. It's going to be awesome. And there are going to be listeners who argue with me, and that's fine. Engagement's a good engagement. And you can tell me I'm an idiot for doing this, but the car felt robotic to me.
Right.
It was all-wheel steering for the first time on a GT3, PDK only, right? And there's a few other little things in there where it was just like, my grandma could get in here and drive just as fast as me if she had the chutzpah to do it,
That's and
And so I called the dealership because when I picked up the car, he's like, Jennifer, I'm glad you're finally here, because it was like a month after it came in before I could pick it up, right? He's like, I'm so glad you're here because we've had people coming in every week offering us, 25 over, 35 over MSRP to buy this car. So I stopped at some diner, some drive-dine, just hole in the
Wasn't
wall,
a
greasy
Waffle
spoon,
House, was it?
It was not a Waffle House. They didn't have them in the state. And I called the dealer. I'm sitting there, I ordered like, eggs and pancakes or something, and I'm like not in love with this car. And I called the dealer, and I'm like, were you serious about people wanting to buy this car? Because I don't want the dealer to take a hit,
Right.
And he goes, why? And I go, I'm not in love. And if you're going to spend that kind of money on the car, I'm sorry. It needs to be a love affair.
Yes.
And he goes, are you serious? I said, yeah. And he goes, what don't you like? And I just went down the list. He's like, where are you? I told him where I was. He goes, okay, that's like 110, 120 miles from here. How many miles are on the car right now? And I was like, I think it's like, whatever, many couple hundred miles on it. Can you come straight here? So I just ordered breakfast, And so I drove back to the dealer. He wrote me a check for what I had just given them literally the day before, plus $5,000
Wow.
to walk away from the car. So they sold it to somebody else for 25 over.
Right.
Right.
I made $5,000 on a car that I owed for like 16 hours. But it felt
Not bad work if you can get it.
I know, seriously. That has never happened again. But it just felt like I wasn't driving anymore.
Yeah.
More than
Right.
anything else, that's what I can tell you.
And here's the thing about I'm sorry because I know Harvey
yeah.
wants to get in on this, but one real quick thing before I forget what it is. 5 years from now, take the fastest automatic out there right now, whatever it is. 5 years from now, they're going to come out with a car that's faster than
Oh, yeah.
that. And then what does that do to your car? Oh, now you just have a less fast version of that. It's not but you have a manual.
Yeah.
30 years from now, you're still going
Right.
to want to drive that thing.
What did Porsche do for the 991.2?
Put a manual in.
Put a manual back in.
Yeah.
I don't think I was the only
But
one.
why do they have to be? Why do they have to be dragged, kicking and screaming over the coals to put manuals in cars? We want the manuals.
This really is a topic with Brendan here.
Well, and for me, I mean, the really good example of that is the Shelby Mustang.
Yep.
GT350.
Yep.
Absolutely my favorite
yeah.
version of the Mustang
the best.
by far.
Track car we've ever driven.
It is such a pleasure to drive. GT500? Unbelievable car, but I do not enjoy driving it. My review of that car, I said, this is a hero car because you can hop in the car tomorrow,
Yep.
push it as hard as you want, and it'll make you feel like a hero. You have to be able to drive
Yep.
drive the GT350.
That is the beautiful part about a manual is it requires you to be the hero.
No,
the car
period.
is
No,
not
no,
the
no.
hero.
It requires you. That's
Yes.
the end of your statement. You don't need to be the hero. It requires you. That's a T-shirt right there.
Trademark, we are motor driven. You're not allowed to use that.
Sorry, that's our T-shirt. I don't know, like why they have to be drag kicking and screaming. And you're right, Brendan. You talked about like it's the economy car is the manual transmission.
They did that to so many cars that
Yeah.
should. So I'll give you an example. The Charger, right? 2006, the Dodge Charger SRT8 comes out. I literally wrote an email to somebody over at Chrysler. I will buy this car in a heartbeat. Put the manual from the Challenger into the Charger so that it is an M5 competition car, and I will buy one tomorrow. Nope. No, they had the transmission, they had the drivetrain, they had everything they needed. That car was built on the same platform as the Challenger, which did have a manual.
Yep.
And they wouldn't put it in. And what'd you have over at BMW? An M5 with a V8.
Right.
Which was an automatic. Oh, man, that
No
car was
longer
so great.
manuals.
No
Speaking
longer.
of the Dodge,
Yep.
the Dodge lineup, do you remember when the Hellcat ended? A couple
Yeah,
years
they
ago.
took the manual out of that thing.
So I was like, this might be a collector car down the road. Maybe I should buy a Hellcat. I'd had a few press cars. I love them.
Yeah.
They are a hoot and holler, so much fun. And I'm like, well, I'd only buy one if it's a manual. I called first I talked to our reps at Dodge. I'm like, hey, is there any chance? You got to call dealers. And I was like, okay, fine. So I called 30 dealerships around the country. I could get a Hellcat. I could not get a Hellcat manual.
Nope.
I wanted Plum Crazy Pearl with a
Yep.
manual. That
Right.
combination was impossible. Couldn't even order it. I could order a Plum Crazy Pearl with an auto, but I
Yeah.
couldn't get a Hellcat manual.
Yeah, one of my favorite that I ever drove at one of the spring rallies, they had the Charger with the manual transmission and the shaker hood, and
Oh, yeah.
driving that around Road America, hanging the tail out on every
Yeah.
corner, and just what a blast! And that you can't do that in an automatic transmission
No.
car.
It's getting easier to do with a double clutch, right? Like you can hold gears if you're in manual mode, whatever. I mean, you can play with stuff like that, but not the same way.
No.
It's not the same.
Now, it's not all bad news because there are some companies that are trying their best to save the manuals. I'm going to call out Toyota specifically because they put the manual back in the Supra.
Yeah.
Now, I think it took Nissan coming out with the Z with the manual. I noticed the timing is a little suspicious, Toyota, but better late than never. Again, kicking and screaming because
Yep.
they didn't put it in to
Yep.
begin with. And then they've got the BRZ and the what is it now?
GR.
The
GR
GR86. I always want to call it the FRS. But I'm a
GR
Sears Tower
Corolla.
kind of
GR
guy.
Corolla.
The GR Corolla.
Brilliant little car.
Awesome,
Super fun.
awesome, so
Super
much fun.
fun.
That car is so much fun. And you've got some companies that are like that, still sticking with manuals.
Honda Civic Si.
Yeah, and it's in the Type R.
The Type R.
Which
And
is
of course, Miata.
Yep.
Yep. The ever-present Miata.
the ever
Miata is
present-
the answer to all things.
Yes.
The Miata will be around for the next 100 years.
I just
pray
wish I
so.
fit in it better.
Yeah.
No, I praise
You
so
and me
because that
both.
car's so
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Such a great car. And even when companies used to put manuals in some stuff, like we had for some reason, and don't hold this against me, it wasn't my car. My wife insisted, she needed a new car, and she had just sold her 92 Eagle Talent. I didn't even tell you that at the first episode. And she had a 5-speed manual, and she got a great price for it. So she sold it to somebody that she was working with, and she was looking for a new car. And I was really hopped up on the new, at that time, Firebird Trans Am with the V8 in it, right? It had just come out with the LT1. This was 93,
Sure,
94. And I could not get her to, no matter what I did, I could not get her to get the V8. So she was like, I don't need a V8. I don't know. Yeah, but you're going to have me driving this car half the time. So I would no, she wouldn't spend the money on it. We got the V6 with a stick shift. That stick shift was so god awful. It was the worst. I don't know if it was a Borg Warner. I know they put the T56 in the 6, but this was a 5-speed. It was a different transmission than the 6-speed. It was terrible, and that they do that then too. I know you had that same experience with the M2 where the stick shift was not that great.
I did not like the manual version of it.
Right. So they're not innovating on a lot of these manuals. Even
Right.
so, when they get drag kicking and screaming to put something a manual in
crappy one
it,
in.
they put a crappy one in, and then they go, "Well, nobody wants to buy it." Well, because you put a junk transmission
Right.
in this thing. Like, do a
Which
good job.
begs the question of the day: best manual transmission you've ever driven?
Oh, okay. I have driven a lot of manuals.
So have I. I'll
and-
start.
Go, please.
NSX.
Oh yeah, I believe you. I've never driven it.
Short throws, exacting throws.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was literally like using a surgical instrument, you know. And then of course they come out with the new NSX, which is
Yeah.
double clutch only.
Yeah, it's-
like stop, but
Also
that
hybrid.
that not like leaps and bounds better than anything else, but it was and I never owned an NSX. I always kind of wanted to. I still kind of want to.
I mean, you and
Prices
me
are now
both.
going up, and I should have when I could have, and now I can't, so I won't. But there was something euphoric about driving that car, and it was the balance. We've discussed balance before
Yeah.
on cars, and there was something about the balance of that car, but it was just a quick flick of your wrist, you know. It was so good that that was the selling point of the car, you know. And you got more horsepower because the automatic, they detuned a little bit.
Right, because back then the torque converter couldn't handle
The power. You know,
Yeah.
that I think is the best manual transmission car I've ever driven. Owned CT4V Blackwing,
Ooh, the current one.
Yeah.
which I had a 2024. I literally just got rid of it, and I'm lamenting that. That was so good,
I've heard very good things about that.
so good. I couldn't get over it.
Yeah.
That whole car is so good. But yeah, that wow, just really, really
Interesting.
good. Yeah.
How about you, Harvey?
I've had a lot of middling manual transmissions cars. I had an E21 BMW, which was nice, but it wasn't special. The Gen 1, GTI Mark 1, it was
yeah.
actually, that was actually a really good
Pretty long throws on
manual.
that one, right there.
Yeah, but not crazy.
Yeah.
It was well placed. I don't know. I think of all the cars I've ever driven. I think the BMW 5 Series, and I can't remember which generation it was.
E39 maybe?
Yeah, an E39 5 Series. It was
The
just.
manuals in that era
It
so
was
good.
such
Very,
a
very
good
good.
car overall,
Overall.
that it probably made me think that manual was the best I've ever driven.
Yeah, it's hard to separate that out when the car
Yeah.
is so good as a whole.
But
Right.
today, I look at the Miata, and again, I'm going to be,
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was gonna say
the
that.
way that shifts and the way they have the pedals set up and the amount of power available that is appropriate for that car, you can make that car do anything with
Yeah.
that transmission, and it shifts really well.
Yeah, speaking of the Miata, we took one on track, and it's always so much fun to drive that car because it's got so little horsepower that you have to wring out everything that engine can possibly give you, and the only way to do that is through a manual.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just, you have to just drive it like you stole it.
More fun to drive a slow
and it
car
just
fast
makes it
than a fast
so
car slow.
much,
Yeah.
so
100%.
much fun.
Yeah.
But I was going to say my probably favorite, the Civic Type R has
Oh,
a
yeah.
great manual now.
Okay.
Yeah,
great
you're
manual.
right. That is a good one. I did do the BRZ launch
Yeah.
when they redid that car. That's really good. They did that at Lime Rock Park, and again, you talk about a slow car fast.
Yeah.
Lime Rock is a great little track. I don't know if you guys
Yeah,
have
it's about a
driven
mile,
it,
no.
but it's they've got the final corner. You come down this hill into a big sweeping right-hander, and you're flat out on the throttle on a car like the BRZ. And so when you come in and you hit the apex and you've got the revs all the way up there, and you just feel the car start drifting out to the exit, of the corner, and it's like, that's what I want a car to do. And with a lightweight, relatively lightweight sports car with a manual transmission on a track like that, that's
Your
just
soul is
magic.
singing at that
yeah,
I
point.
wish all
exactly.
OEMs could see Harvey right now
Yes.
because
glowing.
he's literally
There's
like
a ray of light coming through the ceiling.
there are tears welling in his eyes. This is an experience, and,
Yeah,
and that's
Oh, it's a visceral experience.
Yeah, and it's something like I said, the Shelby GT500. It's a brilliant car, but it's not. You can't do that in that.
No.
All these high horsepower, heavyweight, man. All the technology all over the place. It doesn't feel the same as.
You're not one with the machine.
Yeah.
Okay, my turn.
okay.
And I'm
Back
glad
to
you all went
to
first.
the hot topic guy on
Yeah.
hand.
So
Hit us, Brendan.
So I've heard the NSX, right? Okay, I have never
You
driven one.
do need to drive
I
one.
do need to drive one. So if you have one out there and you will let me drive it, I promise to bring it back shiny side up, and but I would love to. So of the cars, I'll do the list of my own cars versus ones I haven't owned.
You can tell Brendan's been thinking about this a lot.
Well, so the ones that I haven't owned, there's only two. We took out, you mentioned, I was kind of, if you listen back, you'll hear me laugh when he mentioned the BRZ, because we had the GR86, which is its twin, right? Same exact drivetrain. And we had it at Autobahn. And I'm looking at Paul right now because we did this
Audubon Country
really
Club,
great.
south side of Chicago.
Yes,
Yeah,
so we did this
Juliet.
great video. By the way, you need to go to our website, so We Are Motor Driven, over on YouTube, and find these two videos. And we'll have to put these in the notes, links to them. But we did a video of the GR86, and I remember that day, I don't know if I said this on the video or not, but I remember parking that car after a day on the track going, Toyota should be putting this in the minivans that they make. Like, it's that good. That transmission was that good.
Wow.
Everything should have this transmission, right? I remember thinking and saying that at the time. That thing is amazing. The other one I will call out is the GT350's manual. Was
that's
so
Tremec.
much fun to drive. We had that at Road America. You will love watching this video because you will just hear so much excitement in our voices. I've never driven a car on track that was more fun than the GT350. And that video, you'll
Not the fastest car we've ever driven on track,
but the most
but
fun.
so much fun.
I still remember it was
Engaging and fun.
It was probably what, 4 years ago, maybe 5
Yeah.
years ago now.
Yeah.
I still remember how
And
much
that
fun that
flat
was.
plane crank was.
Yeah,
so
the
good.
sound of that engine.
Oh
my
okay,
God.
so
So those are the cars I've
Okay, we'll
of
come
the
back
ones
to
I
the
don't
GT350.
own,
Go ahead.
right?
Yep.
The ones that I've owned, I've had a lot of manuals. Not all of them have been great, but I had an S4, 2005 S4 V8
Okay.
Audi
Audi, yep.
that I put a new speed short shifter in that was just it was
Really?
it was so nice. That one was great. The current Corvette is good. But the pedals are great on the Corvette. So, and they were great on the Audi
Your
too.
Corvette.
My
except
Corvette,
for
the
seventh.
C7. Right. Yeah. The problem is that you hit seventh gear when you don't. They should lock out seventh. They should have locked out seventh on the track, especially if you put it in track mode. There should be no seventh possible because when you go for fifth, you keep getting seventh. So I kind of ding it for that. But I think the one that I thought was sort of just butter smooth from the factory was my 2001 330i BMW. I remember I came out of an Acura CL 2.2, which is essentially a Honda Civic, a 97. And I liked that car a lot. I got into the BMW, and I didn't even get it out of the lot before I wanted it. It was such a great transmission. I mean, I had the wood shifter, and that the gates were just absolutely perfect. The pedals were perfect. The car felt like a tank compared to the Acura CL.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just substantially like stiff, and I loved that car. If it hadn't gotten T-boned when my wife was driving it, but what
So
a
many
great car!
cars in our past.
We're all in tears now.
I know.
So here's a question. How do we feel about rev matching?
Okay, so I mentioned the CT4V Blackwing, right? So I ordered that car a summer ago. I got it in May of 2024, and it has rev matching. And I have been a big negative connoisseur of rev matching. I'm like, let me do it. However, the first 500 miles, it's rev limited automatically. Once you break 500 miles, then the revs open up. And I actually filmed that because that was kind of cool. I was going down to Illinois to like Pumpkin Patch or something. I don't know. But I thought, you know what? If this car was programmed by the V people at GM, they know what they're doing. These guys do a really, really good job. I'm going to let it show me for the first 1,000 miles before I start messing around, right? And you can get a feel for what the engine wants from letting the car do the rev matching.
Right.
And that system was so good that once I got to 1,000 miles, then I opened it up completely, safely in Mexico.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with that. I actually did the Cadillac V Performance Academy last November at Spring Mountain Motorsports Ranch. And there were, 15 of us in the class, and there are 4V Blackwing owners, there were manual owners and automatic owners, 5V Blackwing owners who are manual and automatic owners, right? And it's a 2-day course, and so they try to put you into what you have. So I have a 4V manual on the course. And the first day they're kind of, okay, this person's faster, this person's slower, this person should be with this person. So day 2, I show up and I'm very, very proud to walk in and I see my name on the fast group with 5V autos. And I was like, oh snap. No matter how good I am in the car, I'm not going to keep up with those guys,
If they have the same skill level that you did.
Right. And they were good. So it was super fun. But I did use rev matching on the track, trying to keep up with the 5V autos because I didn't want to think about it.
Right. Right. Well, and it's especially if it's a track you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like I can get on, in a manual transmission car, drive Road America blindfolded.
Yep.
Right. We all can. We all can. Right. But every time, like I do a program, we did BMW M2 years ago at Laguna.
Yeah.
I had not driven Laguna before.
Yeah.
Guess what I did? I got in a manual transmission version of the car and drove until I knew the line.
Yeah.
And then I brought, I went from automatic into a manual.
So you got into an automatic first.
Automatic first,
Right.
and then went to a manual.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to think about shifting and shifting points
Makes
sense.
while I'm trying to figure out the brake point.
Right.
Also, the first thing I always do when I do a track day is I hop in the right seat with the pro driver.
Oh, yeah.
Before I even take a lap of my own.
If they let you.
Yeah, and normally they do. They're really happy to
Yeah.
explain the car and the track and everything.
We need to do an episode on just track driving. But
Yes,
so
we can.
that system you experienced in the Cadillac Blackwing was actually introduced in the C7 Corvette for the first time in 2014. Yeah, 14. So I had a 15 before I have my current 17 Grand Sport. So in the 15, I was amazed how well it works because it really knows exactly
Yeah.
which gear you're going
Seriously.
in and fast enough to get the revs
It's
up.
intuitive. Like it's a mind reading system.
Yeah, it's amazing. I wouldn't use it normally. However, I will tell you because on the, I don't know how it is on the Cadillac, on the Corvette, what they did is they took the paddle shifters that in the automatics would change gears, and that's how you turned your rev match on and off. So it was right at your fingertips.
It's a button.
Oh, okay. So you couldn't do what
I couldn't do that.
you couldn't do what I'm about to tell you
Yeah.
I did. When
I
I
know
would
where
go
you're
on
going.
track days, the problem with the Stingray is that the brake cooling was garbage. And so, and I was trying different brake fluids, and I really was getting like 900-degree rotors in the front, coming off a 20-minute track session.
Bring your marshmallows.
Yeah, so the brakes would get soft, and so what would happen is that at a certain point, when I hit the brakes, I couldn't reach the gas pedal anymore to heel toe
Oh.
because I was too far down in the brake.
Gotcha.
Like I was almost to
You
the
can't
floor.
roll your ankle that
Can't
far.
roll my ankle that far.
Hit it with your knee.
What I figured out though is when that happened, I could flick my hand, turn on the rev match, and I'd still hit my downshift.
Okay.
And so I didn't upset the car. I
Yeah.
didn't have to limp through the corner. So that setup was amazing because it really saved me on a number of occasions.
Yeah.
Then I got into the Grand Sport, which has absolutely no brake issues whatsoever because you got larger rotors, you got better cooling, and that's the whole reason I got into that car in the first place. But yeah, if you're just, if you're having like a tired day or
Yeah,
something,
for sure.
or if that happens and you can do it now, so the button down in the center wouldn't really work for that, but you can just flick that thing, turn it on. It was great. So
is really
I don't
cool.
mind it because I think it helps with newer
for
drivers
sure.
because also it doesn't stop you from doing your heel
Right.
toe with it, and you can practice. It's easier to practice and do it yourself and know kind of where you're supposed to be at.
Exactly. I let it teach me in
Yeah.
this last car, which is really cool.
Because that's the difference between someone who can drive a manual and someone who can drive a manual well is somebody
Yeah.
who knows how to heel and toe.
Yeah, and I'm honestly not the best at it. I didn't know about that skill till much later in life.
Yeah.
And I was like,
same
oh,
thing here.
snap.
Until I started driving on the
You
track,
know?
I didn't really know that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
got lucky. I
existed.
went to a Skip Barber school
Oh,
back
yeah.
in
Yeah.
88 and
Okay.
was taught. It was actually when I was working on Chevrolet Motorsports.
Yeah.
They sent us a few
Well, that
of
was
us
nice
to
of them.
Skip Barber so we could understand car control. And actually, it was put on by the IROC folks. So we had
Oh,
a bunch
cool.
of IROC Camaros that we
Nice.
were doing it in. And Sam Posey took me around
Oh,
Lime
geez.
Rock and all that. So that was a fun
rubbing
day.
elbows.
Yeah.
Harvey.
Just rub it in.
Rub it in, Harvey.
So if you're listening right to this and you don't know what we're talking about with heel and toe, It's a way that you in a transmission, a manual transmission, you need to match.
Match the engine
Yeah, you
speed.
match the engine speed to the wheel speed, because if you just pop it into a lower gear and let the clutch out, your engine isn't going as fast as the wheels. You're going to have, it's going to upset the balance of the car, and in some cases, it could do catastrophic damage if you do what we call a money shift and put it in way too low a gear. But so what you do is while
Do
you're
not do
braking,
that.
don't do that. While you're braking, while your foot's on the brake,
Well, your right foot is on the brake.
Right foot
and
is on the
Your
brake.
left foot's got the clutch.
and your left foot is on the clutch, your right foot also then has to hit the gas as well. So you're hitting two pedals at once with your right foot. And there's different ways you can do it. My feet are so big I just roll over, onto. And so look at, if you want to know what this skill is and how to do it, and you have a manual.
There's some videos out
There are some
there.
great videos online. Learn how to do it. You can do it on the street to practice, and before you get to a racetrack where it's actually kind of necessary to do this skill. But that's what we're talking about.
And being able to heel and toe will transform how you drive a manual transmission.
Absolutely. So just real quick, going back to the GT350.
Yes.
So you guys know I had a 2019,
Yes, you did.
2019 GT350 that we drove hard. We still have a 350R. I actually have a partner on a 350R. So we don't put miles on that car. I don't buy cars to save them. I had a good friend who couldn't get an allocation for one, and I was very fortunate to be able to get one. So we bought it together, and it's in storage because he's got other, like Mach 1s and other very, very special Mustangs. And I told him, well, when you die, this is coming to me. You know that, right? You can't sell this. Your family can't sell this. But so one day maybe I'll get that car back and I'll actually drive it.
yes.
But the 350 I bought because the 350R was so good. And for our listeners, Brendan mentioned earlier in this episode that we do have a YouTube channel, the We Are Motor Driven. So if you go youtube.com/We Are Motor Driven, you'll find us. And it's rides and drives, it's Sons of Speed, it's Auto Exotic, it's Meet, and it's all four of our outlets together in one space. And we all do our own videos, and sometimes we do them together, like with Rolls Royce, which was super fun.
And a bunch of other cars.
And a bunch of
we
other
did.
cars.
Yeah.
But there is a video on there called Rendezvous, I think 2020. So when the pandemic hit and we couldn't go places to video things, listeners to this podcast probably remember the Rendezvous famous video that was filmed in Paris. That was supposed to be a V12 Ferrari rolling through Paris, and those sounds are a V12 Ferrari, but he was driving a Mercedes or something
Yeah,
with
big,
the cameras
like
on.
500.
Big, yeah. Still flying through Paris, which is awesome. We recreated that where my home offices are in Oshkosh. At Whitman Regional Airport, we'd basically shut the airport down for about an hour, and I drove that 350 on our own thing, and I rendezvoused with a plane at the end and then went flying. But if you want to hear the sound of that flat plane crank V8, just go watch this video. It's on our YouTube channel.
Your ears will thank you.
Yeah, your ears will thank you. Make sure it's good speaker. Don't watch it on your phone. Watch it on a computer with big speakers or your
Or
TV.
headphones.
Headphones. But speaking of proponents for manuals, we do have a special guest today. Her name is Megan Closet. She works with Volkswagen. When I met her, she was the Golf product manager for North America. And she is a big part of the reason that the Golf GTI retained its manual transmission status in the States. So we're going to let her introduce herself and take it away, Megan.
Thanks, Jen. Good afternoon. My name is Megan Closet. I am a lifelong Volkswagen enthusiast, fortunate enough to have been employed by my dream brand for the past 20 years. I was the product manager for Volkswagen of America for the Golf models as well as the Arteon, which nobody knows about, but maybe some of your listeners do because it's a select group of people. But everybody knows what a Golf is, and I was the product manager of those lines from 2017 through 2022.
That was a good time, and I actually got to meet Megan. A little personal side story here. In our first episode, we were talking about some of our own cars, and I have and still own a 2019 Golf R Spectrum, and it was apparently one of the first few Spectrums that landed in the country. So Megan and another rep from Volkswagen actually came out and helped deliver that car to me, and no matter what car I've had in the past or will have in the future, I don't think I ever had or will have an experience like that again, where, the car's purple. It's Violet Touch Pearl. And Megan had a beautiful purple dress. I had a striped purple shirt. Like everybody at the dealership were in purple ties. Like
That was so cool.
it was such a fun experience. So thank you again, Megan, for everything you did for the Spectrum program and for that. That was so awesome.
Thank you. I just think it's awesome you still have your Violet Touch Pearl Golf R. One of 12.
One of 6 that's
yeah,
a manual.
and I think it was the first manual transmission Violet Touch Pearl that we delivered in the country. It was definitely the first one in Wisconsin. Might be the only one in Wisconsin.
I think it is the only one in Wisconsin. As you and I know, Mr. Spectrum, who's tracked them all down, keeps me well in the loop of where the different Spectrum cars are when they're popping up for sale. I kind of want to buy one in every color, but that would break me and I would get divorced. So
Yeah, that might be an impossible feat as well, because there are a couple of one-of-ones out there that people will not let go of.
yeah, absolutely not let go. This one's staying in our household forever.
Good.
Knock on wood. So
I'd love to have one too.
yeah, and you've got some fun Volkswagens, and why don't you talk about those? Because I think a couple of your cars have our topic of today.
Oh, do they? Well, I think that 2 out of my 3 Volkswagens do have an association with your topic. One is the one I'm sitting in right now, actually. It's my 2024 Golf GTI 380 Autobahn. So that's a special edition manual transmission GTI for model year 24. And then a lot of folks might be familiar with the Golf R32. I have one of those at home as well.
The original
2004 manual transmission, deep blue pearl.
Oh, nice.
And then my other car is kind of more of a project. It's a DSG. That's the only way they came in the US for this engine, but it's an EOS VR6 with a DSG, which a lot of people might not know that car even was a thing. It's a coupe sunroof convertible.
Hardtop
And it
convertible.
also, that's right, with a full sunroof.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
will add.
wow.
Such a cool
I had
car.
no idea those things came with a VR6.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had 2 model years of the VR6, and I think they produced less than 1,000 of them for the US.
So what I'm hearing, Megan, is you're going to manual swap that?
I would love to. It's
Corrado,
just not
maybe?
really in the cards as far as time or money are concerned.
Yeah, we get that. We get that well, all too well.
That would be the dream.
So the kind of question that we really wanted to talk to you about, and again, thank you for being part of this podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Is we have our own theories on the downfall of the manual transmission. Brendan here is this is a hot topic, hot button for him. He was sweating earlier. Before we brought you in, Harvey was crying about a car he drove on the track. It's been a very emotional episode, but you know,
I understand.
Brendan discussed basically, you know, manufacturers would put the manual as the economical option, right? So it's going to be on the car with the least powerful engine, the lowest, you know, of the range, whatever. And then there are companies like Ferrari who sort of pushed the double clutch thing and just said, we are done with manuals, you know, and this is faster. And thank you again as a product person for keeping the manual in the Golf. I don't think my R would have had a manual if it weren't for you. So thank you for that. But now the Golf is done with manuals. And so this is like a firsthand thing for you. Can you at least give us a little more inside scoop as to why? Like, what are you hearing? Like, why are they going away?
I like the theory that you shared of how the more economical cars, maybe back in the day, you know, for more economy focused brands, even if it were Volkswagen, Toyota, Honda, whomever, you know, you would find the manual transmission as the, like you said, more control over the vehicle, better fuel economy, less expensive. It was typically, you know, maybe a few $100 to $1,000 less expensive to have the manual transmission version of a car. And I think we all kind of attached ourselves to that. And then it became also at least in the US, the calling card of I'm using air quotes, a true enthusiast. You know, your car had to be a manual in order for you to be a true automotive enthusiast, right? So that was like a badge of honor. From my inside experience as a product manager for a European brand such as Volkswagen, their perspective, I've learned, was a little bit different on manual transmission. By the time I was in the role, manual transmission was not a badge of honor in Europe the way it has been in the US among enthusiasts. It's more like, oh, well, yeah, my grandma drives a Polo. My grandma drives a Lupo. Of course, it's a manual. Who cares? My grandma drives a manual. You know, it's more, especially from the German mindset, when you have that opportunity to be on the rarest unicorn of them all, right? The speed, the non-restricted speed section of Autobahn, if you happen to hit that point, you want a double clutch transmission for that. You're not going to be shifting gears when you're driving all out. Maybe you'll downshift, but you use a paddle shift for that. So the mindset is certainly a little bit differently, for better or for worse. That's what I experienced. That's part of what we had to bring into our fight at VW in the US to keep manual transmission, particularly on the Golf R. We were the only market to have a manual transmission for the Golf R from model year 22 to model year 24, just the US and Canada. It was a huge fight to convince Germany why we needed a manual in the US on that car.
Wow. Thank you for fighting the
Yes.
good fight.
Absolutely.
God bless you.
It was a team effort. It was me and many others. My boss at the time was a huge champion of it as well. So I'm very thankful for that.
What's annoying to enthusiasts, because I think you're absolutely right, and obviously you have the inside perspective, so with no reason to doubt you. But what's annoying is that we see over and over cars like the 911 where they try to kill the manual, and then because of demand they bring it back, and then they sell more manual GT3s than they do PDKs.
Yeah.
And when they bring out like a manual only, like the 911R was, and they pre-order them all out of existence before they even hit the market, I would personally love if you could arrange this. Can I grab an executive of Volkswagen Audi Group and just shake them violently by the shoulders and go, "Do you not see what we want? And why will you not give us what we want?"
I'll ship you to Germany so that you can do
Yes.
that, because it would be an echo chamber at Volkswagen of America.
Yes. But why?
We already want that. We already fought for it.
Right. And you would just wonder why they don't have. What are they looking at? What are they not seeing that we see here? And I get that it's a different culture, and they, it used to be that if you went to Europe, everything was,
Sure.
when Mercedes was bringing cars over from at least the 80s forward, they didn't want any manual transmissions because they thought it was a sign of a cheap brand, and they wanted to keep their image up. So, but you went to Europe. Every Mercedes,
single taxi, every taxi,
everything.
Yeah.
The taxis,
They
right.
all had manual transmissions
You're right,
in
Brendan.
Mercedes, and so it's like they didn't. It's not that they didn't have the cars or they didn't make the cars. They wanted to cultivate a certain image, and Cadillac did the same thing in the U.S. too. So it's not just them, but clearly the message has been sent on these enthusiast cars, and of course the GTI is probably one of the best-selling ones. That hey. These people over here in America really want these manual transmissions. Is it there's not enough of a market that makes the financial sense, or are they just so stubborn that they just don't want to give in to what we want, and they just want to force us to take what they think is best for us?
It's a multitude of factors, really. Part of it is the unfortunate truth that although enthusiasts such as ourselves, and the Volkswagen enthusiasts in particular, are the loudest bunch, the squeakiest wheels, unfortunately, we're a small bunch, especially when you look at the global landscape of Volkswagen Group. Unfortunately, the sales of GTIs and Golf Rs in the US is, as a whole, quite a bit smaller than Golf sales in the larger markets such as Europe. So we're a loud bunch, but we're a small bunch. So from a global perspective, there's that business aspect of it. The other aspect is, as the technology of double clutch transmissions has really advanced since the first one Volkswagen came out with in model year 2003 with the European R32, things have changed a lot with those double clutch, with the DSGs, with the PDKs, with the S-tronics, right? They're now more efficient than a manual transmission, which we hate to admit, right? They're faster than a manual, which we hate to admit. And they also produce less CO2 output, which is
Something we hate to admit.
and we hate to admit that too. So those few factors, which are not fun to come to terms with, together with the fact that the US is a pretty small market for these very important cars, just means that there's not a whole lot of dog left in the fight.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's what it boils down to, right? Is where's the volume? And while we are passionate about our manual transmissions, the 80% of people who commute to work every day are really happy that they don't have to work their left leg out in rush hour traffic.
And we are forgetting one thing. They make cars to make money.
Yeah, I guess
Right,
that's
there's
to
that
just
part.
make us happy, right? Yeah. Well,
I mean, you guys are already losing enough on every Bugatti you sell, so you can't do the same on your manual
Every Golf they
transmission
sell?
Golf.
Well, my argument and perspective on this is that the lack of demand is a direct result of what the manufacturers have done over the years to intentionally or unintentionally squelch or squash that demand. And it was kind of like, in certain vehicles you couldn't get the manual in the best vehicle. So, for example, and it's not the best example, and I'll tell you why in a second, but I bought my daughter a 2018 Jetta, and the highest trim level I could get below a GLI was an SE, which is the third up
Middle
from the
trim.
base. So, and then in subsequent years, they even knocked it down to where you could only get the manual in the very base or maybe the Wolfgang. And then
Yeah, we have it in the Jetta S and the Jetta Sport up until last model year.
Wolfsburg, not Wolfgang, just for there.
oh, did I say Wolfgang?
You did.
Yeah, sorry. Amadeus Mozart.
Thanks,
yes.
Jen.
But that is a situation where if you wanted better stuff in your Jetta, and you wanted to go up in trim levels, you couldn't take the manual with you, and for no good reason that we could discern on our end, other than we just think this is a cheaper. Like, you only want this because it's cheaper. No, we want it because we want to be engaged in the driving experience, and so and that times 1,000 going backwards in time, leads to the lack of demand, because now all the fun goodies that everybody wants on the car are only available if you take the automatic. So what's going to happen over a period of 20, 30 years is people are just not going to be used to driving manuals and aren't just going to be interested in it, because you have now eliminated that choice, because you've put this shiny object in front of them of all of this cool stuff that they can't get if they take the manual. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy by the automakers to do that, and then to turn around 30 years later and go, well, nobody wants these things. It's like, yeah, but that's your fault.
We leave it to Brendan to go biblical on a manual transmission.
As you can tell, I am a very, extreme
Fervent
devotee.
supporter.
Yes, but that's my, and I understand now we've got other considerations that have propped up, like the EPA, like you talked about the emissions, and also now the electric cars coming. That's just
And
not gonna happen.
self-driving,
Self-driving,
and all that kind of
all
stuff.
of the
Yeah.
safety stuff.
Right. And you could add in the American propensity to prefer SUVs.
Right.
Oh, don't even go
we
there.
can name on probably one hand all of the modern, I'm using air quotes again, modern SUVs that have been available with a manual transmission. And I'm not talking about like a Ford Explorer in the 90s or like a hard body Nissan Pathfinder, right?
Right.
Like, other than a Porsche Cayenne,
Oh, when that had a manual.
what other modern SUVs have come with a manual?
Well, the Ford
Like
Bronco.
the Volkswagen Tiguan did in its first generation front wheel drive.
Yes. And that Cayenne with if you could get a Cayenne turbo manual that has less
Hey.
than 120,000 miles on it.
But you're
Buy
right.
one.
You talk about like enthusiast to the max, like what a niche market SUV
Oh,
for
oh
the manual,
gosh,
right?
yeah.
So it's like that propensity for Americans to buy into this SUV market, a vehicle type or a crossover that doesn't have a manual ever offered, and that those are the cars that parents are passing down to their kids in many cases, right?
So they don't even learn.
So that also feeds into the unfortunate death of the handshaker.
I really feel like we should be playing lamenting violin music in the back of this episode.
Yeah,
at
Jen,
this
you've got
point.
the musical background. Where's
I
the,
know, I know. We should
You're going to
like.
write a specific piece.
I'm going to write a
The
piece
Death of
just
the
for this,
Manual.
the death of the manual. You talked about Wolfgang. We'll just go there.
Right.
So Megan, in your professional opinion, two questions. What can be done from an enthusiast standpoint to encourage manufacturers to at least keep something on the books that we can aspire to? And number two, what can we do from our standpoint as journalists to encourage our readers and viewers and listeners to go out and learn how to drive manuals? Those kids who are getting those SUVs,
Right.
like what do we do to inspire them?
I think your second question is a lot more fun than the first question.
Well,
because
sure.
I feel like the second question has a lot more of an actionable result that we can see more immediately, right? I love when I see articles from various automotive media outlets of, here's the list of the cars that are still available with a manual transmission in model year X. That's always fun, and do automotive outlets still do driving events for kids to learn how to drive a manual on the track? Like, how cool would that be?
Right.
You take whatever's available in model year 25, model year 26. It still has a manual that's not a luxury car, as far as it's not a 911. It's not a BMW. Grab a Civic Si or whatever the case may be. Show kids that it's cool to drive a manual. I think that's the other thing too, right? Because like Brendan, you were saying, it's just hard to convince kids to get into a manual. It's really a parent's decision. So
if it wasn't for me, my daughter wouldn't, that was her first car on purpose because we had an Audi A3 and I sold it intentionally and got the Jetta because I didn't want her to be on her phone. I didn't want her to, be distracted. And I knew the best way to do that was to give her a lot to do in driving the
Right,
car.
right.
And plus, I wanted her to be able to understand and appreciate, what it was like to drive a manual. And I will tell you this story. She went to a high school, 4,000 kids, and she was one of only 2 people who could even drive stick in her entire school. The other was a boy, and he was smitten with her because he, found a chick who could drive a manual, right? So of course she was the coolest girl, in his eyes.
Obviously.
And true. But she will not give that manual up for anything. She loves that car. She does not want an automatic. She's adopted everything that I've taught her well. And but that's what happens when you just give somebody that opportunity and let them drive and experience it for themselves. Someone with an enthusiast mindset will naturally gravitate that way. If they just look at driving as like, I need to get from point A to point B. I don't care if I'm driving. Like these people that don't even get licenses until they're like 25 or something. Like those people are not going to be driving manuals, right? But the ones who are itching at 15 to get into a car like on day one with their learner's permit, like I want to drive. Those are the people that we need to capture somehow. And I think you're absolutely right. Driving events would be a great way to do that.
Right. I think it's also difficult for enthusiasts such as ourselves to really accept. I know it's difficult for me to accept. I don't want to generalize that the climate surrounding driving and getting one's driver's license has really changed.
It has.
I know I couldn't wait for the day I turned 15 and a half to get my permit. I was at the DMV office the day I turned 16 to get my license and take my driving test.
Yeah, we were there
the
like
first day I could legally drive to
7:50
work.
in the morning. We were already
at
there.
age 16, I was driving to work, and it was just that taste of freedom. And
That's what it was.
you mentioned, Brendan, some kids are not getting their license, or they're waiting until they're in their 20s, or they're just relying on Ubers and Lyfts and mass transit, which is just a shift in.
Boo.
Yeah.
That sense of freedom is really what drove the U.S. car market in general from its inception. The 50s were marked and the 60s were marked just by this boom from people coming back from war, and the youth just represented like, this is my freedom.
Right.
You look at a movie like American Graffiti, that's all about just the freedom that the automotive whole culture represented.
Getting out of the house.
And we're losing that now. Yeah, and there's too many distractions. You got phones, you got video games, you got movies, you got Netflix.
No reasons to leave the house.
Right, and that's
Right.
that's the problem.
Especially when we experience being at the house all the time during Jen's favorite time, the pandemic, where he's like, I don't need to leave. This is great. But to go back to the first part of your question, Jen, about how do buyers, how do enthusiasts show manufacturers, that's really challenging, especially when there are certain manufacturers who have already indicated a complete exit in the U.S. market of manual transmission. As far as the ones who are still in the U.S. market with the manual, actively producing those transmission options, buy them.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
But with your wallet, just buy those cars.
Right. We're gonna have a whole
you can
stack
you can lambaste the manufacturers all you
BRZs.
want who have taken them out of the market. But what about the ones who still have a manual in the market?
Yep.
Yeah,
Buy those.
buy those.
Okay. Well, everybody listening, you have your marching orders.
Or
Buy a manual.
buy a certified pre-owned Volkswagen with a manual.
There you go. There you go.
And teach your kids how to drive them.
And teach your kids how to drive them.
Yep. My
100%.
my daughter learned to drive in a VW Golf convertible manual.
Yep.
So that was her
That's so
her car,
cool.
and she still drives a manual today.
So I actually went out and found a friend who had a Rabbit that was a manual because we didn't have a manual car in our household. And I asked my dad, do you know anybody? He's like, no. So a neighbor of ours, friend Chris Bankson, thank you, Chris, if you're listening to this, had a rabbit, and we went to a neighborhood that was nothing but hills. And he said, by the time you can
Wow.
get out of here, you'll know how to drive a stick.
Yeah.
And that's literally what I did. And my son, who's a percussionist, learned how to drive on our Mark VI Golf R, a manual, but he's a percussionist. It was pretty easy for him. He picked it up real quick.
Right.
So, Megan, I'm going to read this now because I want you to hear it. I was going to read it at the end of this podcast, but you need to
Well,
hear
this is the end of the podcast.
This
Go
is
ahead.
the end. Okay, good. Well, I wrote this as a back many years ago. It's up on our Instagram page, but it's with the topic of the day. This is, I think, very important. It says the manual transmission is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass the love of slamming gears and matching revs to our children in the bloodstream. It must be taught, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the world where driving was cool.
Oh man,
There you go.
that hits close to home, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It's all the
Megan,
field.
thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. Really appreciate you.
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Of course.
Love talking about cars.
Always good to talk about cars with people who love cars.
That's right.
Exactly.
And that's all of you.
This is all about.
All of you listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe for more of this from the We Are Motor Driven podcast. I am Jennifer with
Paul.
Brendan.
Harvey.
All right, we will see you next time, guys. Thanks so much.